Okay. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We will be touching on a few key methods of communication you may encounter over the years in your local union engagement. So that's the focus for tonight. Fun meme there on the screen. Job interviewer asks, communication is essential in the workplace. Do you have good communication skills? And he says it to himself, me who can barely order a meal at McDonald's. And then yes. So I described that for Shauna, as I know that she's dialing in. So just a little joke there. We all feel like we can barely order a meal at McDonald's sometimes, and they ask us to be professional and communicate well in the workplace. So that's always fun. We have a poll to get us started, to get everybody interactive and engaged. So Cheryl, are you able to launch the poll? Perfect. So in the past year, in a professional capacity, I have, and we'd like you to choose all that apply. So have you written an email? Again, this is in a professional capacity in the past year. Have you written a local union funding request, put forward a motion in a union meeting, asked a question during a union meeting or information session, written for the newsletter, advertised an event, maybe cold called for a campaign? Have you done any of the above in the past year? And choose as many of those options as apply to you. All right. So I see that most, on average, 3 out of 3 who responded have written an email and also asked a question during a union meeting or information session. So that's awesome. And one of you has put forward a motion in a union meeting, so that's pretty neat. What I would like you to do in the chat is tell us some types of communication you'd like to see addressed either in this webinar today or in a future workshop and webinar event. So what are some of the types of communications you'd like to see addressed or touched on or explained?
You can also feel free to speak it out. There's only 4 on the meeting, so we shouldn't talk over each other too much.
Absolutely.
Nope. All right.
All right. So the types of communication for trades and technical workers. So styles of communication, the way that we communicate with others is one thing that we're going to touch on. Newsletter columns or articles, blurbs in the newsletter. If you are a committee member or a committee chair, you might need to write a blurb. Emails, speaking up at local union meetings, creating advertisements for events, and cold calling for campaigns. So this is not an exhaustive list of various ways we communicate each day or even monthly on behalf of our peers and members. There are many ways we impart or exchange information or news. Tonight, we're going to touch on some of the foundational skills and techniques for expressing our ideas through some of these focuses. So the objectives of this webinar tonight are that you will be able to focus your point and purpose of communication. You will communicate concisely and effectively, evaluate useful and effective templates and structures for communication, and enhance your delivery with positivity and confidence. So the best way to get started with that is to begin with your purpose and your focus. So you want to begin by identifying what you want to communicate. Whether speaking or writing, you want to begin with your point, your purpose, and your focus. What is the message you want to convey, and identify why you are passionate about it. Brainstorming is an effective way to help you narrow down your point and your focus to that one main message that you want to convey. So brainstorming is something that you just freely do. You can draw, scribble all over the page. You can write it in a list. You could do a pro-cons list, but just brainstorming those ideas. And you want to think about, why is this important to me? Then narrow it down to that one sort of theme of your brainstorm. What is this idea here? And narrow it in on that one point. Then the next step, again, whether writing or speaking, you want to identify who you are communicating to. And this will help you identify the style of your communication. To help with communication styles, according to Rhonda Hillier of Agreement Dynamics, who is the author of Success Signals, Open the Door to Getting More of What You Want, every one of us has a unique way of expressing our thoughts, feelings, and beliefs. We all develop preferences and tendencies towards certain words, phrases, volume, the pitch, pace, body language, and other signals to send our messages. The preferred set of signals that each of us uses is known as our style of communication. It's not what we're trying to get across, but how. So we do have a workshop available to you in the future if you would like to get more in depth than what I do tonight with Success Signals. So that's something that you can reach out to your local union business manager and request that workshop. With Success Signals, there's 4 communication types, 4 main communication types. And the colors there on the image, they define each one of those communication styles briefly. And then I will also talk about what happens if you're a combination, if you resonate with more than one. This will help you to be aware of your communication style and be mindful of the communication style of the person you are talking with. That way you can be more mindful about the way that you deliver your information to them, as well as how they respond to the information that you deliver to them. So you can be mindful of things like, are they someone who receives well, brief and concise, direct responses, and their type of communication style. So let's jump into colors themselves. So those are the communication styles. The following descriptions that I share with you, they're a general description of the 4 styles. These are not mutually exclusive descriptions. Some individuals may have a strong orientation to one style, while many people reflect a mixture of 2 or more styles, depending upon the situation and the people involved. So starting there with the Brown communication style. Brown style, when communicating in this style, the person is direct and brief. They focus on tasks and results. They are assertive and often speak in commands. They tend to want yes or no, black or white answers. They don't want a lot of details. They want to stay focused on a point and discuss the bottom line. They often do more than one thing at once and will appear impatient if things are moving too slowly. They like structured presentations. Green style communicators, when communicating in this style, the person is logical, sequential, and details oriented. They often give historical date and discuss the process. They tend to communicate literally and factually. They often understate emotions and appear reserved. They need time to process information and will not be rushed to make important decisions. They are skeptical of ideas that have not been evaluated. They like advanced materials and accurate, thorough presentations. So those are some of the descriptions of brown and green. One of the things that I notice when I look at the green is the fact that it kind of looks like it's an Excel spreadsheet, and green style will definitely have an Excel spreadsheet running in the background somewhere. And one of the things that stands out with brown is that phrase, just do it. Like, they just want to get it done. Just tell me exactly what you need me to do and I will get it done, and it will be done and it'll be checked off my list, and then we'll move on to the next thing, right? And so that's kind of your brown people. There's still two more colors, so let's take a look at red and blue. So the red style, when communicating in this style, the person is often flamboyant, dramatic, and energetic. They often tell jokes or stories. They like testimonials and creative examples. They tend to overgeneralize for effect. They are bored by monotone, highly technical presentations. They often stray from the point of the meeting and are non-sequential presenters. They like humor, creative ideas, options, and upbeat, fast-paced presentations. And blue style, when communicating in this style, the person often asks how others will be affected and whether they are being included in the decision-making process. They like to chat and form a personal connection before getting on task or discussing the business at hand. They often emote and present things in terms of feelings. They tend to clam up if they sense hostility or rudeness from others. They like people-oriented presentations. So briefly, you might think to yourself, I maybe identify with one of those. I maybe identify with all of them, some of them, little pieces of them. If you had to choose, do you feel like you might present more as a brown person, a green person, a red person, or a blue person? Yeah. All right. Any guesses about what Cheryl might be? Anyone?
Be nice, everyone.
So Cheryl laughed. I don't know if anyone noticed, but Cheryl laughed incessantly as I described the brown, because that is Cheryl to a T. Yeah. So very much task-oriented, which is awesome. And I identify, like Michelle, with blue, actually. So that's great. There are combinations. So I will briefly explain a little bit from my notes about some of the combinations that you might see. So green, brown, brown, green, you might see that kind of combination. So the green being someone who shares accurate information, well-researched, very detail-oriented, where brown is get things done, let's check it off the list. And so that combination together can be very thoughtful decision makers. They are logic rather than emotion. That's sort of what drives them. And planners who take timely action, and they're steady and goal-oriented. Another combination could be red-brown. So red being that person that expresses and creates change, and the brown gets it done, right? So that person can be a creative decision maker, flamboyant, results-oriented, impatient to do now. And they're often entrepreneurial. So if you have an entrepreneur in your family or in your friend group, you might think, gosh, they kind of remind me of a red or a brown, right? So blue-red could be an interesting combination. So there on the screen, if you put those two together, so blue being connected with other people and red being entertainment oriented. So they would be expressive and emotive, caring and fun, flamboyant, yet sensitive. And if you've got green and blue mixed together, which I feel I am a little bit of a combination that way, right? So exchange accurate information and facilitate relationships. So this type of person is thoughtful and caring, both intuitive and analytical, logical and emotional, high quality results in all information, or with all involved, sorry, and slowest decision makers. And so that's definitely like, let me weigh all the options before I make a decision, research it well, and then I will get on it. All right. And then, so blue, brown. So those people, so blue, again, connecting with other people, and brown, getting things done. So they can be caring yet ready to press on. They can include others, but make quick decisions. People and task oriented at the same time, and relationship and results oriented. Green and red together, exchange accurate information, which is the green, and the red is entertainment. So planning, spontaneous, logical and intuitive, gets details and big picture, which is somewhat of a rarity, right? Often someone will be either very details oriented or very big picture oriented, but it can be a great combination with green and red. And they're also a cautious risk taker. So it almost feels like an oxymoron at that point, right? So cautious risk taker. So those are some of the combinations that you can see. When you think about yourself, you want to think about how you communicate out. And so, for example, if I call up Cheryl, who is a brown, and I'm a blue, and I'm like, hey, Cheryl, how was your weekend? What did you do? How's your family? You know, and I'm doing the whole personal connection, and Cheryl's only got like 5 minutes. Well, then I've got to really quickly get past all the people connecting stuff, and I just need to get straight to the point, and I need to be prepared for no conversation on the family, and just yes, it's done, or yes, I'm doing it tomorrow, right? So that's one way to be mindful with our communication. All right, does anyone have any questions? Cheryl.
I was just going to say, and the flip side of that has occurred with myself, which is I would initially write very brief emails to the point that people thought they were standoffish. So I actually had to start kind of softening the edges depending on who I was writing to. So it's really important to very much understand how you like to communicate, and know that how you prefer may not be well received by who you're talking to. So in order to make that connection and convey what you're trying to tell, it's best to know what they prefer. Because if I wrote that very short standoffish email to Kate, she might think that I'm upset at her, when in fact, that's just, I thought I was giving her all the information she needs to get the task done.
Yeah, absolutely. So does anyone have any questions about this very brief overview of communication styles? Nothing, no? All right.
Not seeing anything in the chat.
If anything comes up, feel welcome to pop it into the chat anytime. We can stop and address it whenever it comes through. Otherwise, feel welcome to unmute and ask any questions at any time. So let's get into some of these communication tools. So your blurb for your local union newsletter. So if you're a Next Gen committee member or a women's committee member, you might be asked or expected within your local union to be contributing to a monthly, quarterly, weekly newsletter, right? So a newsletter is a vital communication link to help keep members informed. So we always want to remember what the purpose of the newsletter is itself. Then we want to think about our role in it. So we want to make sure that if we're writing a blurb, we're using professional language. So, hey dudes is not going to be the professional language we're looking for, but something more like, you know, a greeting, a professional greeting, brothers and sisters, or fellow members, or something to that effect, right? So then you want to look at your opening. You want to introduce yourself and your purpose for writing. So tell them who you are. It doesn't have to be super involved, but just, you know, hey, it's Mark again, maybe, for example, and you're going to say, I'm here to update you on, the activities with the Next Gen committee this month. So there you've identified who you are and the purpose for that article. Then in the body, you're going to explain what has happened. So explain if you've gotten together for any meetings, if you have events coming up, what you're planning to do. If you've had events pass by, explain how the event ran, where it was, how it impacted the members, right? So that's where you're going to tell everything all about what you need to convey. Then in your conclusion, you want to very clearly detail the impact that the local union membership have had on your event or on your committee, and how that event or maybe even that committee has impacted the labor movement. So, if you had an event in the community or you did some charity work in the community, it got the local union's name out there, right? So members of the community saw the local union doing this work. And so that's how it impacted on the labor movement, because now others can call up the local union hall and ask to join, and the rest is history. We got new members, right? So once you have the blurb written, you want to walk away from it entirely for at least an hour. Absolute minimum, bare minimum is 1 hour. Walk away from it, have a cup of coffee, watch a favorite show, do something else. But if at all possible, walk away from it for a day, 24 hours. Then come back to it, and you want to carefully look over it again. Read it, check for spelling, check for grammar, but you also want to check for your sentence structure. Has it all made sense? Is it flowing well? And one of the ways that I would recommend helping you with editing, and this was something that I found it highly useful with any of my papers anytime I was writing something, is to put the written document through a text-to-speech reader. So you can Google that, find a free text-to-speech reader. It might get really monotonous with the robotic computer sound of it coming back to you. Can be kind of numbing, but it really actually helps to hear when you misstructure a sentence, when it doesn't flow well. You still catch that, you still pick that up with the robotic sounding computer reading it to you. And so you go back and you edit it and you're like, oh, that's not at all the word I meant, right? Like sometimes we put were when we meant where, different things like that. The computer reading it aloud to you, you hear it and it's not yourself skimming over. So that's an effective way to check for editing. And then, so the other option is to read it aloud yourself. So if you're looking it over and you're like, you know what, I'm totally skimming this because I wrote it myself, then stop yourself and start reading it aloud, and record yourself if you want, and that will help you to structure it. So I know we have a template that I put together that I think Cheryl can drop into the chat for you all to download and save, and then you can pull that up anytime you have to write a blurb for your local union newsletter. And
if you can't download it from the chat right now, I will be sending out an email to all of you, and you'll get that as well. So just if you happen to be joining from a phone or something like that, I will send it to your email.
Awesome. Thank you. Emails. Speaking of emails. All right. So Cheryl will send you a professional and concise email. And so, before we jump into this though, what are some common professional email mistakes? Can anybody think of some funny or totally embarrassing mistakes?
It may even be a mistake you've made. I could tell you a few of mine.
All right, Cheryl, you're up. Tell us about them.
So just a couple. So in one of the reasons that we're really doing this on communication is because a lot of us that work in technical or trades fields, we may have picked those because we could do something with our hands and we didn't have to spend our days communicating and writing documents and things like that. And so a previous supervisor of mine would always send out emails with what he wanted to tell you in the subject line, and the body of the email would be blank. So you would have to scroll through the subject line to get the message. So that is a big mistake. And when we're talking in a professional capacity, you want to write an email. You don't want to write it the way that you would write to your friends. So, no, and I think Kate will touch on some of that, but, and I know she's talked about, hey guys, hey dudes, things like that, opening very professionally. And I know she'll get into some of those details, but yeah, if you're writing it the same way that you might chat with some of your buddies, probably making some mistakes from there.
So some of the other mistakes that can come up is, a group email, you're included on a group email and you want to reply specifically to just the person that that emailed everyone, but you click reply all by mistake and you tell everybody your business. That's always entertaining in a professional setting. I scrolled through my sent box the other day and realized that I had intended to take the most recent replier out of the 2-line and put somebody else there, but I had totally forgotten to do that. And so I'd sent it back to someone who didn't need the information. So there's many common mistakes with emails. So let's try to avoid some of them. So when you're composing an email, you want to be specific when defining the subject line of your email. So Cheryl brought up the subject line. So you want to make it clear to your recipient, but also you don't want the whole subject of the email in the subject line. So I will often sit back and write out the entire body of the email and then think to myself, what is the purpose of this email, or what is the topic of this email, or what do I need this person to know? Sometimes I will ask myself, what's going to grab their attention and cause them to open the email, right? So if it's an emergency of sorts, then I might flag it somehow, right? Like make sure that my subject very clearly says urgent and what it's about. Another thing that you want to do is ensure that your attachments are attached. So some email programs, thankfully, will remind you before you send it off. Like it'll say, hey, you said attachment in the body, but there's no attachment here, which I find super helpful. And I'm very thankful for those programs. And I cringe every time that I use a program that doesn't do that for me, because I am notorious for forgetting the attachment, right? So some things to think about is the CC line and the BCC line. So some programs have the BCC line hidden even. So I know I had to turn mine on in my work email. And so what I use the BCC line for, so that's blind carbon copy, is anytime I'm sending out a group email to people who maybe don't want everyone to see their email. So perfect example is, a few months ago, I was sending out a Webinar Wednesday reminder email. And so because everybody's on a registration list and you don't know who else is on that list, and, you don't necessarily want your email going to everybody, the entire, local union membership, I put everybody in the BCC line. Then you can't see who that email goes to. With the CC line, the carbon copy line, those are the people that the email maybe is not directly addressed to, but they're the people that you want to keep informed about what you're discussing. And so that's a useful tool if you just want to inform somebody, like maybe you and the shop steward had a conversation on the job site that you were going to email a question to the business manager. And so you compose it to the business manager, you put it in the 2-line, and you CC the shop steward on it so that they know that you followed through on what you said you were going to do. Like that would be a use for that. Or for example, Cheryl and I send a lot of emails back and forth, and often you've seen International Representative Jim Watson on with us. And so, if Jim's asking a question, then I'll reply to Jim and CC Cheryl. Or if it's Cheryl that's asking the question, Cheryl's in the to line and Jim is CC'd just so he's included in the information. So the email itself, you want to introduce yourself. You want to explain your subject. So put those details like the who, what, where, when, why, and how. So explain and detail the purpose of your email and make sure those points get addressed. So maybe you're updating on committee events, and you're writing to tell them about that. Why are you passionate about your subject, right? So how does this impact you personally, and how does it impact the local union membership? If you're writing, for example, to your business manager or to your executive board, let's say. Also detail in your email, what are you aiming to achieve through the communication? So maybe you're writing to request volunteers for an upcoming event. So detail that in the email. And maybe it's that you're writing to a community organization that you want to engage with. And so you want to make sure that they understand that you would like to come and help out at the local soup kitchen or something like that. You also want to think about, do you expect, for example, your executive board alone to address your email, or do you want the communication to go out to the general membership? And make sure that that's expressed in your email. Now, with the email itself and the structure, so I'm going to completely and fully disclose that I am formerly a middle and high school teacher, and I absolutely love using colorful, playful, attention-grabbing fonts and emoticons or emojis. Like notorious emails, the students were like, I got a new email from Miss Kate. Did you see all the colors and the emojis? Don't do that with professional emails. It pains me to say, keep the emojis out. Keep the font black and white. It's bland and boring, but this is a professional environment. This is a professional email that you're writing. And so you want to make sure that you are received and perceived as a professional. I know that we had another template, so you can pull up a quick how-to with emails and access that the next time you yourself need to write a professional email. Public speaking. Raise your hand if you absolutely love standing in front of a mic and speaking to a group of people.
I think we're going to see crickets in the room here.
All right. So stepping up to the mic can be daunting. I don't know about you, but I often feel like an imposter. However, thanks to the research of social psychologist Amy Cuddy. Amy Cuddy is someone you can see in TED Talks on YouTube, or you can pick up her book called Presence: Bringing Your Boldest Self to Your Biggest Challenges. Amy Cuddy, she has told us that there are some fairly simple tricks you can use to mentally prepare your mind for the task ahead. So here, pictured on the slide in front of you, are two different poses. The power pose, the woman in the blue dress, which is actually Amy Cuddy herself, she's standing in a power pose. And so you can choose to stand in that pose, or the other photograph is the victory stance. So yeah, I've done it, and just fully extend it like you're truly celebrating an incredible victory you've just achieved. And know that our bodies can change our minds, and our minds can change our behavior, and our behavior can change our outcomes. So the recommendation here is to do this for 2 minutes. When you stand either in that power pose or in that victory stance for a consistent 2 minutes, it changes your mind. And that in turn changes your behavior and the outcome that you're hoping to achieve. So fake it until you make it. Keep speaking and know that tiny tweaks like taking the time to do a power pose can lead to big changes. Some other things to help us is to be incredibly prepared for the speech ahead of time. So what should I know? You should know your topic, your stuff, know it, make sure it's well researched, know your audience. So audiences can be friendly and they can be not friendly. If you know what type of audience you're speaking to before you go in, then you can be well prepared for what's to come. And also know your environment. The specific elements of the speech itself. You want to begin with an introduction. So in your introduction, have an attention getter. So often an attention getter would be a joke or a personal story. It might be a funny story. It might be a tearjerker, something that pulls at the heartstrings, something that grabs the audience's attention. And then you want to make sure that your introduction is relevant, credible, and is a preview to what the main points are. So then you'll move into your body of your speech, and that's your main points. What is it that you're trying to explain to your audience? And you want to have transitions between those main points. So make sure that you transition those well. Then you get to your conclusion and you review your main points. You restate what, rephrase, restate what you were trying to effectively communicate to them, and then have a clincher. So you don't want to have a great speech and then leave them flat with nothing else. So recognize that public speaking and your speech at the microphone is more than words. It's also the tone of your voice, your body language. Over half of our message comes from our body language. And then you want to think about your presentation. So how are you dressed? When I look at you, are you so loud that I can't hear what you're actually saying? So think of your dress. Sometimes when it's a local union meeting, I know you might be coming in straight from work and, you might have some extra dirt on you from the job or, just kind of be blah from the day. But if you have a shirt or something in the vehicle that you can change into, then that's going to help people focus on your message and not what you're wearing. And once you've got your speech written, you know your audience, you confirmed the place and time, the logistics, you think to yourself, am I ready? You want to be sure to practice and then practice again and then practice again. And you might even record yourself. You might sign into a Zoom meeting and record it all by yourself, and practice aloud, practice with your phone, practice, practice, practice. So having your say, how can you use your voice to change the lives of working people? You speak up and you have your say. If you can keep from fainting at the mic, that's powerful. And it's a critical skill to have for all of us as we each one are in a leadership role. Having the ability to face a crowd opens the door to a world of possibilities. You have something worth sharing. So speaking about what is on your heart and in your mind, speaking about what you are passionate about can inspire and effect change. Being heard. Again, this is where we think back to the communication styles we started with at the beginning, right? So be mindful of the communication styles presented earlier as a snapshot of the Success Signals program, and always be mindful not so much about what you are saying, but rather how you are saying it. You want to practice your tone. You want to be mindful of your volume, and you want to think about your style. Ensure that you're leaving the lasting impression you want to leave. And then committees often have events. And so they have advertisements, and it's important to know how to create a great advertisement to get people out to your events. So if you are going to use the local union logo, ensure that you have permission from your local union. It is required that they have given the permission. In advertisements, if you're wanting to use the official IBEW logo or bug, that specifically must be requested through the First District office, through the international office, to use the official logo. So that's where you will want to go back to the email template or the letter writing template and just make that request formally through the international office. When you are thinking about posting your advertisements to social media platforms, you want to keep in mind the aspect ratios on various social media platforms are different. So even though Instagram and Facebook are friends and Twitter has their own thing going on, they all have different aspect ratios. So you want to make sure that you access a resource or a tool that helps you prepare for those differences. One of them that I will mention that's a free resource that Cheryl introduced me to is Canva. And that's a free resource at canva.com. So Cheryl's popped it into the chat. Thank you. When you're thinking about a poster for an advertisement, you want to keep it simple, have a simple design to it. Know that less information on a poster is actually more. So you want to pique people's interest with the advertisement, but you don't want to give it all away necessarily. You want them to ask questions. So less is more in that sense. Depending on what you're advertising, you may want to include the where, when, cost, and deadline of the event. And always, as I mentioned earlier, be mindful that anything with your local union logo and name must first be approved by your local union. If you're getting your posters printed, you want to be mindful of using a unionized print shop. Consult with your local union about unionized print shop suppliers. They will have the best resources. As well, through your local union, your business manager has access to local connections where the IBEW has its own media handbook with lots of great tips and suggestions for any sort of advertisement or media campaign. And so speak to your local union about accessing that resource to help you prepare for your next events and anything you need to advertise. Here are a few of the classic graphic design options. So Adobe software has a couple of design options. As I mentioned on the previous slide, Canva is there in the middle. Microsoft Publisher is as well. And then GIMP, I think. Cheryl, do you know more about that one? I haven't accessed
Yeah,
that.
so GIMP's like a free version of Adobe Illustrator is kind of it in a nutshell. That's not exactly
Cool.
it, but it's a more advanced graphic design tool that is free. So that's kind of in line more with Illustrator. Adobe Spark is more your social media type simple designs, whereas Illustrator, you can get into really like heavy graphic design. And then Canva is what I love because it's free and you can do all sorts of stuff with it.
Cool. Awesome. All right, cold calling. So with cold calling, if you are joining any campaign of any sort, you want to prepare a script in advance. So introduce yourself, explain where you're calling from and why you're calling, and ensure you do it with positivity and enthusiasm. So with a script that you have prepared ahead of time, just ensure that it's not more than 3 or 4 sentences. Be mentally prepared to be hung up on. And so anticipate those objections to your phone call and just be prepared for it, right? And remember that friendly and non-friendly audience we talked about with the public speaking and being prepared for that. It's the same thing with cold calling. So be positive, be enthusiastic, and if all else fails and nobody answers, leave a message. So cold calling can be an excellent tool for your local union and any campaigns for any of the labor federations or labor councils, as well as we will likely want to get cold calling for any sort of elections in our future as well. So with all of that said, Nat Turner has said that good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. And so that's the point and purpose of this webinar, is to help us all cross that bridge to clarity. And I hope that the tips and resources and tools that I have suggested today have been helpful to you.